Good versus evil. A fight that has been going on since before the beginning of time. A fight that comes crashing into a God-fearing community in Tennessee in 1817. Welcome to the InBetween. I'm Carol Ann, and today we travel to Robertson County, Tennessee, to a legendary showdown between a faithful Baptist family and an epic evil presence. A battle known today as the Bell Witch Haunting. 1804, North Carolina. John and Lucy Bell and their 5 kids load up all their worldly possessions into their prairie schooner, better known as a covered wagon, or the 19th century version of the wood-paneled station wagon. They are headed west in search of more land and a radical change of scenery. But they're not going to be alone in this mostly unsettled new state called Tennessee. In fact, many of their friends from North Carolina have already made the trip. They get to a place called Adams in Robertson County, where all of their friends are already settled and buy about 1,000 acres of farmland on the Red River with a house already on it. They settle in and have 3 more babies, making the Bell clan a total of 10 mouths for John to feed. So besides John and Lucy, there's Jesse, Drury, John Jr., Esther, Zadok, Elizabeth, or Betsy, Richard, and Joel. But John is a hard worker, honest, devout Baptist, and a good farmer. It does not take long before John starts doing pretty well for himself and his family. To say he is a respected member of his community would be an understatement. That brings us all the way up to 1817. That is when the trouble starts. One day, John is out in the field and sees an animal a ways off in the field. In all the 13 years he's been hunting this land to feed those 10 mouths, he has never seen anything like this. It kind of looks like a dog, a huge dog, but it's not a dog. It has the body of a dog, but it has the head of a rabbit. Whatever it is, he shoots at it several times, but it just runs off. A few days later, Drury sees some kind of really big bird perched on a fence. He thinks it must be a wild turkey. He runs in the house to get his gun to shoot it, because a big fat turkey can feed a lot of mouths. But once he gets back and ready to shoot, the thing flies off. And that's when he sees it's not a turkey. It's something else, something way bigger than a turkey. Sometime after that, Betsy sees a little girl in a green dress swinging from a branch of a tall oak tree. But then she's gone. Betsy's with other kids, but none of the other kids saw the girl. And it's after these 3 oddities that the knocking starts. Each night, there is knocking and scratching on the outside walls of the house. John just thinks it's somebody trying to scare them, but try as they might, they can never catch anyone doing it. They never see anyone running away, and they never find any tracks around the house. This goes on for like a year. John tells his whole family not to say anything to anybody. He is sure they will catch whoever is doing this. Then, things step up a notch. Now, John and Lucy sleep on the first floor of the house and the children on the second floor. Betsy has a room of her own, because she's a girl, and the 4 boys who still live at home, Richard, Drury, Joel, and John Jr., sleep in another. As soon as the boys are settled into bed, they hear a rat gnawing on the bedpost. John and Drew get up to kill it, but no rat. They settle in again, and the gnawing sound starts again. They get up again, but they don't see anything. And they don't see anything on the bedpost, like a spot where something's been chewing on it. This goes on for most of the night, with the boys continually getting up to search for whatever is making the noise. They can't find anything. They can't even find a place where a rat would even get into the room. Same thing repeats night after night. Then it starts to happen in Betsy's room. So it would make a ruckus in the boys' room, and as soon as they got up to find it, it would start making a ruckus in Betsy's room. No one could get any sleep. and it gets louder over time. And sometimes they would hear something that sounded like a dog scratching on the floor. Then things step up another notch. Whatever this thing is, it starts pulling the sheets off of the boys and making this strange choking sound. No one in the house could get any sleep until it would quit, usually between 1 and 3 a.m. Then, as if it just decided that it needed to add a new torture, it starts pulling hair. And not just a tug. Richard was just a kid when this all happened, and so he didn't even really know anything about the knocking on the walls. But the first thing he truly remembers happening to him is the night his hair gets pulled so hard that it lifts his head off the pillow. Once things actually start happening to the children, John decides it's time to bring in some help. Now, if you read any of the books about this story, you will find out quickly that there is a huge cast of characters. But to keep the story under 3 hours long, we're really only going to mention a few of the important ones. There's the Bells' best friends and neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. James Johnson, their 2 sons, John and Calvin, Reverend Sugg Fort, a Baptist pastor, and the Gunn brothers, James and Thomas, both Methodist pastors. There's Kate Batts, the town eccentric, and Joshua Gardner, Betsy's boyfriend. Fun fact about James Johnson: not only did he fight in the Revolutionary War, but he has the most misspelled name in this entire story. You can't hear it, but Johnson is actually spelled with a T, so Johnston. But for some reason, the Scottish don't pronounce the T. Huh. Okay, so John decides this whole thing is getting out of control. So he goes to his best friend, James Johnson, and says, "There is some strange crap going on at my house, and I have no idea what to do about it." So James says, "Well, why don't the missus and I come on over and spend the night? I'm sure we can figure this out." They come over, and as soon as the light is out for the night, the same things start happening to them. Strange noises and the sheets being pulled off. And it doesn't matter how hard you hold on to the sheets, the force pulling them is always stronger. Finally, James is so frustrated that he just asks it,
"In the name of the Lord, what or who are you? What do you want, and why are you here?"
Everything is quiet for a while, until it isn't. The shenanigans start up again, with the entity creating disturbances as it jumped from room to room. Poor Betsy seemed to get the worst of it. Her 2 best friends, Thenny and Rebecca, who would regularly come over and stay overnight, would hear the crack of an open hand slap and watch the redness appear on Betsy's cheek. Things actually get so bad for her that John and Lucy send her to other people's houses to spend the night. But the entity would follow her and bother not only her, but the family she was with. Unfortunately, even though it was pestering Betsy somewhere else, it still pesters the Bell house at the same time. These disturbances go on night after night, and more people are invited to the Bell house in hopes that someone can figure out what is going on. Over the course of their investigations, it is discovered that this entity is intelligent. If they ask it a question like, "How many people are here?" or "How many dogs do the Bells have?" the answer would come in the form of either knocking or scratching, with the right answer every time. Over the following days and weeks, the number of visitors begins to grow, with the Bells doing their best to house and feed them all. And the ghost begins to talk. It starts with people hearing faint, unintelligible whispers, which strengthen to low, soft whispers, which strengthen until it's loud enough to be not only heard, but understood by everyone in the room. So they ask again, "Who are you, and what do you want?" "I am a spirit. I was once very happy, but have been disturbed." The voice becomes stronger and stronger over time until it becomes capable of full conversations and even starts to inject itself into family affairs. John Jr. is planning a trip to North Carolina to deal with some family business. In the middle of his conversation to go over all of the details with his parents, the ghost busts in and tells John Jr., "Don't go. The business you hope will be done when you're there won't be. So it's going to be a hard trip for nothing. Not to mention the fact that the girl of your dreams is coming to town." John Jr. obviously laughs off the ghost's advice and goes anyway. 6 months later, he returns, having accomplished nothing in North Carolina. And a very nice, young, cute, rich lady came to town to visit family while he was gone, but she's left already. After a while, they ask it again. "Who are you? What do you want?" And the answer comes back the same. "I am a spirit who was once very happy, but have been disturbed and made unhappy." But this time they ask, "How were you disturbed and what makes you unhappy?" "I am the spirit of a person who was buried in the woods nearby, and the grave has been disturbed, my bones disinterred and scattered, and one of my teeth was lost under this house, and I am here looking for that tooth." At first, that doesn't make much sense, but then they remember. A couple of years earlier, Drew and his friend were poking around what everyone assumed was an old Indian burial ground looking for artifacts. Drew's friend brought a jawbone back to the Bell house, threw it against the wall, knocking a tooth out that dropped and fell between the floorboards. John Bell chewed the boys out for their disrespect and had one of his slaves take the jawbone back and rebury the bones. So that must be it. That's why the spirit is so unhappy. John rips up the floor where the tooth fell between the floorboards and sifts through all of the dirt underneath, but can't find the tooth. That's when the spirit cackles and says, "Ha! Just kidding." Word is spreading about the goings-on at the Bell House, and more people are showing up, all of whom get full room and board hospitality, including feed for the horses, for which John never takes a dime in return. People are continually asking the spirit questions, to which they get no answers, until one day, James Gunn, one of the Methodist pastor friends of the Bells, asks it some kind of question about why it's here, to which it tells everyone that it's the spirit of an immigrant who had hidden some money on the property and now wants to give it all to Betsy Bell. It gave specific instructions as to the where and the how of retrieving said fortune, and the spirit-appointed excavation party heads out to go find it. They move this huge boulder and then dig down another 6 feet under that when the spirit again says, "Ha! Just kidding." The spirit continues to get stronger, and while the exhibitions of short sheeting and face slapping continue to happen only in the dark, the voice starts talking not only in candlelit rooms, but also during the daytime. And it showcases a new talent: impersonations. Whoever or whatever this thing is, it can not only sound like anyone else it wants to, but it can recite word for word what someone has said in the past. And it has a thorough knowledge of the Bible cover to cover. It can quote scripture with the best of them and even corrects those who quote it wrong. They even test it. They open to some random page in the Bible and give a chapter and verse number, and the spirit can tell you what the verse is. It can also sing any hymn in the church songbook. Now, remember that I said some of the Bells' best friends are the Reverend Sugg Fort, a Baptist pastor, and the Gunn brothers, James and Thomas, both of whom are Methodist pastors? Well, the spirit even goes so far as to partake in religious discussions with them, or anyone else for that matter. It is even able to recite the sermons of both Reverend Fort and Reverend James Gunn that were given by them on the same day at the same time, 13 miles apart, in their voices. Not to mention that it knows everything that's going on with everyone in town. If you manage to step out of line, the spirit makes sure everyone knows about it. Consequently, Everyone in town starts to become a little godlier because they don't want to be called out in front of everyone by the spirit. Not a bad side effect. And while all of this seems amazing, and dare I say even beneficial for some people in town who may have been straying a little too far away from the 10 Commandments, it is still tormenting the Bells, namely Betsy and John. Betsy gets hit with these fainting spells, while John suffers through these times where his tongue feels stiff and he feels like he's got something in his mouth, like a stick going across. Weird, and while not life-threatening, it's enough to make him not be able to eat for a little while. Now, we're pretty sure we know why Betsy is being tortured. She has caught the fancy of, and fancies right back, one Joshua Gardner. Keep in mind, she's super popular, and so is he. So they're like the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce of their day. But for some unknown reason, the spirit doesn't like Joshua and continually tells Betsy not to marry him. But Joshua, being the good man that he is, just keeps standing by her side. Eventually, Betsy's fainting spells ease up, but her dad's troubles just keep getting worse, with an even worse affliction developing. The twitching and contorting of his face, with the spirit declaring that it will torment old Jack Bell to the end of his life. All the while, more and more people arrive to ask the spirit questions. And if the rumors are true, that even includes future President Andrew Jackson. But the entity never gives an honest answer. First, it's the disturbed spirit looking for its tooth. Then, it's the ghost with buried treasure. Then, the spirit of a dead child in North Carolina. And then, John Johnson's stepmother. But somehow, James Gunn is able to crack the code. And while no account of this story tells us exactly what his question is, we do know the answer. The spirit replies, "You have put the question in a way that can no longer be evaded, and I cannot tell the preacher a flat lie. I am old Kate Batts' witch, here to torment old Jack Bell out of his life." What? Kate Batts? But she's still alive. As far as anyone knows, she's not a witch. A little eccentric maybe, but kind and neighborly, with no one ever saying a bad word about her, and certainly not a witch. Most people don't believe it, but some do. Of course, the real Kate Batts gets wind of this and she's pissed, but it's too late. The spirit becomes known as Kate. And just so you know, from this point on, when I talk about Kate, I'm talking about Ghost Kate. When I talk about the real Kate Batts later, I'll call her the real Kate. Now, if you remember, all of the trouble started in 1817. So by now, we're up to about 1819. As terrible as Kate is to both Betsy and John, she is exactly the opposite to John's wife Lucy, and is often heard to say that old Luce is a good woman. Kate actually goes out of her way to do nice things for Lucy. One evening, Lucy mentions that she wishes she knew if her son Jesse had returned home yet from a big trip that he'd taken. Kate replies, "Hang on, let me check." And after about a minute, returns to tell Lucy, "Yep, he's at home reading, he's fine." The next day, Lucy talks to Jesse and asks him, "What were you doing around whatever time last night?" Jesse says, "I was at home reading." So Lucy does her best to appease Kate to keep the goodwill flowing. Unfortunately, Lucy can never, not for lack of trying, use Kate's affection for her to convince Kate to ease her torments on the rest of the family. Around September of 1820, Lucy comes down with a bout of pleurisy, which is inflammation of the lining around the lungs, making it painful and hard to breathe. While it's easily treated today, 1820 is a different story. Lucy is down for the count for weeks, and rarely does Kate leave her side, asking her how she's feeling and did she sleep okay. The presence is so constant that even though Lucy is trying to do her best not to make Kate angry, sometimes she just has to tell her, "I can't deal with you right now." And if Lucy is resting, Kate is quiet. Lucy's condition worsens and she gets to a point where she stops eating. Kate gets so worked up about it that she tells Lucy, "Hold out your hands, Luce, and I will give you something." Lucy does as she's told, and into her hands fall a bunch of hazelnuts, witnessed by a couple of ladies who had stopped by to check in on her. The ladies, completely amazed, check the floor of the room above Lucy's. But the floor is perfect. There's no way anyone could have dropped them from above. After a while, Kate asks Lucy why she's not eating the nuts. Lucy says that she would, but she's too weak to crack them. Much to Lucy's surprise, Kate says, "I'll crack them for you," followed by cracked nuts falling onto the bed next to her. And not just hazelnuts. Kate would bring Lucy grapes too. Took a while, but eventually Lucy recovered. One evening, as the evening's guests are talking about the whole grapes phenomena, Kate breaks in asking, "Who wants grapes?" And she proceeds to drop a bunch right in Betsy's lap. Now, there are plenty of people who find it really hard to believe that any of this is going on, that it must be someone in the family faking all of it. One of those is Detective Williams, who comes to the house and says he would like to investigate. John says, "Okay, come on in," and welcomes the detective with the same hospitality as he has extended every one of the hundreds of other guests trying to solve the mystery. But Kate is quiet that night and all the next day. Detective Williams finally loses his patience and says, "I knew it. This whole thing is a scam perpetrated by the family for money." John, a little incensed that this stranger is calling out his family's honor, starts making moves to toss this guy out of his house when Kate breaks her silence. "No, you don't, old Jack. Let him stay. I will attend to the gentleman and satisfy him that he is not so smart as he thinks." So John backs off, and no more is heard from Kate for the rest of the evening, which of course makes Detective Williams all the more smug about it. She's not going to show herself for as long as I'm here. But once everyone is settled down to sleep, including Detective Williams, Kate returns with a vengeance, pinning the detective down and beating the crap out of him while asking him, "Which family member do you think this is?" and just spewing out this torrent of beratement. The ruckus wakes everyone up and they light candles. Once they do, the physical beating stops, but the verbal one does not. Detective Williams spends the rest of the night sitting in a chair next to a lit candle and is gone before breakfast is served. Detective Williams is not the first nor the last, either detective or magician or witch doctor, to come to the Bell house hoping to be the one that can either expel the witch or expose the fraud. But only one did John Bell seek out himself. One Dr. Mize of Franklin, Kentucky, about 35 miles away from the Bells in Tennessee, has a reputation as an accomplished magician and conjurer. How can he help? I have no idea. But John's facial contortion issue is getting worse, and he's getting desperate. He may not have believed at the beginning that this invisible force could actually kill him, but he's starting to change his mind on that one. So he follows the advice of his friend James Johnson and sends for the magician, who arrives a few days later, studied up, armed with his spells, and ready for business. And he's there a few days, mixing potions and reciting incantations. And of course, Kate is silent the whole time, which Dr. Mize takes as a good sign, telling everyone there, "Witches are shy around me." Until one day, when Dr. Mize is mixing up some kind of potion, Kate asks him, "What are you doing?" Dr. Mize is a little freaked at first, since this is the first time he's actually heard Kate, but just tells her, "None your business," and continues with whatever he's doing. Until Kate says, "You forgot something." Dr. Mize says, "What did I miss?" Kate tells him, "If you were a witch doctor, you would know how to aerify that mess so as to pass into the aeriform state and see the spirit that talks to you without asking silly questions." Dr. Mize asks Kate Basically, why should I believe you? To which Kate responds with her trademark tidal wave of beratements. You are a fool. You have no idea what you're doing. Which freaks out the doctor, who promptly leaves, stating that this thing knows more about witchcraft than I do. I can't help you. So, life goes on like this for many more weeks and months. The verbal abuse and physical attacks continue to escalate for John, and no one can do anything about it. The spells of facial contortions and stiff tongue are getting so bad that they land him in bed for a couple of days at a shot. Nobody can figure out why. Why John? From all indications, John Bell is not a perfect guy. He still has the occasional issue with a neighbor or whatever, but he's well respected in his community and has lots of friends who would have no time for anyone who does not possess a profound moral character. Now, most of this account comes from John's son, Richard, who was just over 7 years old when the whole phenomena started. As an adult, he wrote a book called Our Family Trouble, where he, with some help from his still surviving siblings, wrote down sort of an abbreviated account of what he could remember. And this is what he had to say about his dad.
No man was ever more faithful and swift in the discharge of every duty. To his family, to the church, to his neighbors, to his fellow man, and to his God. No mortal man ever brought a charge of delinquency or dishonor to his door. Not even the ghastly fiend that haunted him to his death, in all of its vile curses and evil threats, ever brought an accusation against him, or uttered a solitary word that reflected upon his honor, his character, his courage, or his integrity.
And how can this entity, who is so fond of Lucy, act so savagely towards those that Lucy loves? Lucy is lucky enough to find herself in Kate's favor, but unlucky to have to watch the attacks against both her children and especially her husband without the ability to do anything about it. But here we are, October of 1820. John is recovering from a particularly heinous attack that kept him in bed for a week. But this particular day, he's feeling better, so calls on his son Richard to take a walk with him to the hog pen, which is only about 300 yards from the house, to figure out which pigs are staying and which pigs are going. On the way there, walking on a perfectly smooth road, something jerks his shoe off his foot. This is not exactly a new game for Kate. She's done this to some of the other kids as well. So Richard, knowing the drill, immediately helps him to get the shoe back on and ties the laces in a double knot. They start walking again, and the other one flies off. So that one gets put back on and tied in a double knot. But Kate continues to play this infuriating game the whole way to the pig pen. The frustration and stress can be seen on John's face, but he does his best to remain stoic in front of his young son. On their way back, John's shoes come off again, and he gets slapped in the face so hard that it kind of stuns him, and he sits down on a log for a minute. Then an attack of facial contortion starts again, which spreads to his whole body. While John is dealing with this new physical assault, Richard does his best to at least keep his dad's shoes on his feet. But every time he gets a shoe on and tied, it just flies off again. After a few moments, Kate takes her leave, singing and laughing, and the assault on John ends for now. As John stands up to walk back to the house, Richard sees tears running down his father's face. He looks like a man who has lost any semblance of hope. He says to Richard, "I can't take this much longer. I'm pretty sure I don't have much time left." And then he looks to heaven and prays to God to take this suffering from him. But if that's not in the hand he's been dealt, then to please stay by his side and give him the courage to face whatever his future may hold. John's heartfelt prayer seems to be answered with a feeling of peace, and the father and son walk home without anything else happening. However, once he gets home, John goes back to bed. He has his ups and downs over the next few weeks, but the trip to the pig pen would end up being the last time John Bell ever leaves his home. Much to the dismay of family and friends, John's health steadily declines, and there's basically nothing that anyone can do about it but sit and watch. Now, it was John's habit to get up every morning and wake up the family for the day ahead. But December 19th, 1820 is different. He's still sleeping when Lucy wakes up. He's been so sick lately that she decides to just let him sleep until after breakfast. Breakfast comes and goes, and John is still asleep. They go in to wake him up and discover that they can't. John Jr. goes to the cabinet to get his medicine and instead finds a smoky-looking vial about a third full of some dark liquid. He asks everyone, "Who touched Dad's medicine?" Everyone says, "Not me," and no one recognizes the smoky vial of dark liquid. They send for the doctor right away, but Kate busts out laughing and says, "It's useless for you to try to relieve old Jack. I've got him this time. He will never get up from that bed again." They ask Kate about the strange vial. She says, "Oh yeah, I put it there. I gave old Jack a big dose last night while he was sleeping. That'll fix him." Once Dr. Hobson arrives, he looks at the vial and says, "I didn't give it to him. I don't even know what it is." John Jr. took some of the dark liquid in a straw and gave it to one of the cats. The cat ran in circles for a couple of minutes and fell over dead. John stays in this kind of coma all day and night. Nothing anybody tries can wake him up. The mystery vial is thrown into the fireplace and a blue flame shoots up the chimney. John never wakes up again and passes away the morning of December 20th, 1820, with Kate laughing and singing the whole time until John's last breath. Then she goes silent. Mercifully, she stays silent until after John's funeral. But once that last shovel of dirt is thrown and the last mourners turn to leave, she breaks out singing, "Roll me up some brandy-o," and continues singing until the last of the mourners enters the Bell house. After John's death, Kate settles down quite a bit, but she stays active enough so no one forgets her. Not that they would anyway. But as the weeks go by, Betsy, who by now is head over heels in love with Joshua as much as he is head over heels in love with her, starts to think, Kate hasn't said anything about not marrying Joshua in a long time. Maybe everything's gonna be okay. Easter Sunday in the spring of 1821 is a beautiful day. Betsy, Joshua, and some of their friends decide to go down to the Red River to fish for the afternoon. As the two are enjoying some rare time alone, the quiet is broken by the all too familiar taunts of Kate yelling, "Don't marry Joshua! You can't marry Joshua!" Betsy, with the all too fresh memories of what her father went through at the hands of this entity, just cannot bear the thought that if she marries Joshua, that Kate might assault him in the same way. So she breaks off their relationship that day and never sees Joshua again. Shortly after, Kate makes one more appearance to Lucy to let her know that she's leaving, but that she will be back in 7 years. And amazingly enough, she stays true to her word. In February of 1828, only Lucy, Richard, and Joel are living in the house, with the rest of the children grown and out living their own lives. One night, Richard hears that same sound of something gnawing on the bedpost. Goes on for several nights, but he doesn't want to say anything to Joel and his mom, only to find out they're having the same issues too. Kate's same old tricks of the scratching noises and pulling off of the covers. After a quick late-night family meeting, they all agree to not talk to Kate. Maybe she'll go away. And thankfully, within just a couple of weeks, she does. After the death of their father, the remaining Bells go on to live somewhat normal lives and go on to spread descendants throughout Tennessee, Missouri, and Kentucky. One interesting side note: Calvin Johnson, son of James Johnson, and one of the only people to shake hands with the Bell Witch, actually invented a writing system for the blind that used raised lettering that the blind could read with their fingertips. Braille, right? Not so fast, cowboy. Calvin makes the trip to New Orleans to get a patent for his invention, only to be told that a Frenchman named Braille had just gotten a patent for the same thing 1 week earlier. Yo! Okay, like I said before, this account comes from Richard Williams Bell, who wrote the book called Our Family Trouble, where he wrote down sort of an abbreviated account of what he could remember. He then gave that manuscript to his son, James Allen Bell, with strict instructions that the diary of sorts should go nowhere until all of John and Lucy's children had passed away. The diary just sits collecting dust for a long time until it is acquired by one Martin Van Buren Ingram, who uses it to write a book in 1894 called An Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch. And the publication of that book is the main reason we know the Bell Witch story today. So, the burning question is, did it really happen? Well, I think something really happened. What that is, I'm not sure. What I am sure of is that there is a lot of controversy surrounding Mr. Ingram's account. The theory is that Mr. Ingram made the whole thing up, fabricated his original source, Our Family Trouble, his original source for his book, and that the Bell Witch never existed before his book was published in 1894. Could that be true? Well, the original manuscript of Our Family Trouble is nowhere to be found. But absence of proof is not proof of absence. Could very well just be sitting in somebody's attic somewhere. However, some people have gone over Ingram's book pretty thoroughly and have concluded that there's something fishy with the writing style, use of biblical verses, etc., that lead them to believe that Ingram wrote both books. However, we now know that Ingram's 1894 book was not the first mention of the Bell Witch. The February 7th, 1856 edition of the Green Mountain Freeman reprinted an 1849 article written by the Saturday Evening Post entitled The Tennessee Ghost. The Post article directly accuses Betsy Bell of using ventriloquism to fool everybody. Rumor has it that Betsy sued the paper for slander. I would. But unfortunately, I can't confirm that. And that's not all. We now have a second corroborating source. Army Captain John R. Bell, no relation, was traveling from Cape Girardeau, Missouri to Washington, D.C. As he passed through the Red River area, he makes a note in his journal.
Rather, a single circumstance was here related to me, of a young girl of about 15 years of age, residing but 3 miles from Murphy. A voice accompanies her, which says she should marry a man, a neighbor. Thousands of persons have visited her to hear this voice. In many instances, it will reply to questions put to it. Captain John R. Bell.
It doesn't mention Betsy or the Bells by name, but sure sounds like he's talking about them to me. And the contents of Captain Bell's journal is accessible, and its whereabouts is documented since he wrote it, so we have no reason to believe that it's not authentic. So, we have various references talking about the Bell Witch, which makes me think the events in question happened. So, now the question is, what were the actual events? Were they something paranormal or over-exaggerated teen angst? Well, one interesting clue comes from a chemistry professor at Austin Peay State University named Dr. Megan Mann. She zeroed in on the description of what was ingested by John Bell. The story says that whatever it was, it killed the cat really fast, and when thrown in the fire, shot blue flames up the chimney. Guess what element burns blue? Arsenic. And humans can actually metabolize arsenic in small doses, but cats can't. So if you give a cat arsenic, it's going to go a little nuts and keel over pretty quickly. And despite its high toxicity, arsenic was used for a number of things around that time frame, including pesticides, pigments, and cosmetics, not to mention some medicines. Okay, so it sounds like there's a really good chance that John ingested arsenic. The next question is, who gave it to him? Some Bell Witch scholars have a theory that Lucy Bell and the real Kate Batts were in cahoots to kill John. But this makes no sense to me. Why? John seemed to be a good man, so I don't see why Lucy or the real Kate would want to get rid of him. And I don't think that the real Kate would be able to play the part of the ghost Kate, even if she had Lucy's help, for too long without being caught. And if the two ladies did conspire to kill John, why spare Lucy from the witch's abuse? Wouldn't that just look a little suspicious? An even darker theory suggests that Betsy created the whole thing as a way to save her from her father's unwanted advances. But that doesn't make any sense to me either. If this were the case, then why make things happen on those nights when she is safe at her friends' houses? Attention? Maybe. But Kate was also known to be able to reproduce people's voices to a T and know what's going on at other places. Betsy would not have been able to recite the two sermons that were given at the same time. You could say that maybe the doctor made a mistake and gave John the wrong kind of medicine. Mistakes do happen, except no one at the house had ever seen that bottle before. So where did it come from? Another thing the skeptics like to say is that the whole thing is a hoax made up in the 1950s to make some tourism dollars. Well, the Bell Witch Cave, which is a cave just off of the Red River that was part of the Bell property at the time of the hauntings and is said to be where the witch went after she left the Bell house, is now a tourist attraction along with some of the original buildings from the Bell farm. But the Bell Witch was part of Tennessee folklore long before the cave was open to tourists. And if you live in the northern Tennessee, southern Kentucky area, and want to meet the Bell Witch herself, head on over to Adams. There are plenty of stories online of people who have experienced everything from whispers in the ear and pulling of hair to being just up and slammed to the ground. And that brings us to our last possibility of what went on in that house and who killed John Bell. The witch did it. Wow! That story had way more meat on its bones than I thought it did when I started. As usual, there's far more information about the story than I could get in this video. If you want to dig deeper, we have both books, Our Family Trouble and An Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch, that we used as sources for this episode, available in our Amazon store under the recommended books section. That link will be in the description. Just know that it is an affiliate link, so if you buy something from our store or anything else in that shopping session, we do make a small profit, but your price stays the same. If you are in the mood to continue your ghost hunting adventures, click right here. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.